I'm a 32-year-old woman married to my husband, who's 34. We've been together for 6 years, and for the most part, our marriage has been smooth sailing. We're both financially stable. My husband works in tech, and I work in marketing. On top of that, I inherited a significant amount of money from my grandfather a few years ago. He was a savvy businessman and left me a clear stipulation in his will. The money had to go into a trust for any future children I might have. It was non-negotiable, and frankly, I agreed with his decision. The trust fund was meant to provide a secure future for my children, free from anyone's interference, including mine. When our daughter Lily was born 2 years ago, I set up the trust fund just as my grandfather intended. The terms were strict. No one, not even my husband or I, could access the funds. The money would remain untouched until Lily turned 25, at which point it would belong to her entirely. I didn't think much of it at the time. It seemed like a smart, responsible thing to do, and it gave me peace of mind knowing Lily's future was secure. Enter my in-laws, John and Carol. On the surface, they appear well off. They live in a big house, drive fancy cars, and take vacations to exotic places. But anyone who knows them well can see the cracks in the facade. They've always been reckless with money. John has a gambling problem, and Carol is obsessed with get-rich-quick schemes. They've made terrible investment decisions over the years, and while they've managed to keep up appearances, it's clear they're not as financially stable as they pretend to be. The first sign of trouble came during a family dinner a couple of months ago. My husband and I were at their house, enjoying what I thought would be a casual evening. At some point, the conversation shifted to Lily. But my mother-in-law, Carol, casually mentioned the trust fund. She said she'd heard about it from my husband and wanted to know more. I was caught off guard, but I explained the basics, how it was set up, the legal protections, and the fact that it was for Lily's future. I didn't think it was a big deal. But then John chimed in, saying something like, "It's great that you're planning for the future, but wouldn't it make more sense to keep that money accessible? You never know when the family might need it." He said it so casually, like it was the most logical thing in the world. I was polite but firm. I told them the trust was legally airtight and couldn't be touched, even if I wanted to. That was the end of it, or so I thought. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags when Carol laughed and said, "Family should come first, don't you think?" It wasn't just a passing comment. There was a certain edge to her tone, like she was testing the waters. I brushed it off at the time, but now I realize that was just the beginning. A week later, John and Carol showed up at our house unannounced. This isn't unusual for them. They've always had a habit of dropping by without warning. They said they wanted to talk, so I invited them in. Once we were sitting down, they got straight to the point. They wanted me to adjust the terms of the trust fund. They called it a family safety net and argued that it was only fair for the money to be available in case of emergencies. I was stunned. It was such a blatant request, and I couldn't believe they were serious. I calmly reiterated what I'd told them before. The trust fund was locked down. I couldn't change the terms even if I wanted to. But they wouldn't let it go. They kept pushing, saying it was irresponsible to hoard that kind of money when it could be used to help the family. What frustrated me the most was my husband's reaction. He didn't exactly side with them, but he didn't back me up either. Instead, he suggested that I hear them out and see if there was a way to compromise. It felt like a betrayal, even though he probably didn't mean it that way. From there, things escalated quickly. The next week, the in-laws called a family meeting. They said they wanted to discuss financial fairness and presented a plan to access the trust fund for a real estate investment. That's when I started to suspect something was off. They were too eager, too insistent, and the whole thing felt calculated. It didn't take long to figure out why. After a bit of digging, I discovered they were in significant debt. Their investment wasn't an opportunity, it was a desperate attempt to dig themselves out of a financial hole. When I confronted them about it, they didn't even deny it. Instead, they doubled down, saying I was selfish for prioritizing money over family. The final straw came when they issued an ultimatum. Either I amended the trust fund, or they would never forgive me. My husband, bless his heart, tried to mediate, but his suggestion to compromise only made things worse. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about boundaries and respect, and they had crossed every line imaginable. At that point, I knew I needed professional advice. I consulted my lawyer to confirm the trust's protections and explore my legal options. Thankfully, the trust was as secure as I'd hoped. But even with that reassurance, I had a sinking feeling this wasn't over. John and Carol weren't the type to back down easily, and I could sense that more drama was on the horizon. A few weeks after the family meeting disaster, my in-laws, John and Carol, reached out to invite us to their vacation home for the weekend. They framed it as a chance to smooth things over and reconnect as a family. I was immediately suspicious. They'd been relentless about the trust fund, and I doubted their intentions. Still, my husband thought it was worth going, insisting it could ease the tension. I didn't want to escalate things further, so I reluctantly agreed. When we arrived, the vacation home was exactly what I expected from them. Flashy on the outside, but with signs of neglect once you looked closer, peeling paint, outdated furniture, and an overall sense that the upkeep wasn't a priority. They greeted us with exaggerated warmth, acting like there had never been any conflict. We had dinner together that night, and as expected, the conversation shifted toward finances. John and Carol started reminiscing about how hard they'd worked to build their life. They talked about the sacrifices they'd made for their family and how much they loved Lily. Then, out of nowhere, they offered to gift us the vacation home. Their condition? I would need to amend the trust fund to allow emergency family access. I froze for a moment. It was so blatant, it almost didn't seem real. They framed it as a generous offer, saying it was their way of giving back to the family. But something about it didn't sit right with me. The timing, the sudden kindness, and their insistence, it all felt off. I declined politely but firmly, explaining again that Lily's trust was untouchable. That's when things took a turn. John leaned forward, his tone shifting from polite to condescending. He started talking about how family sacrifices for each other and accused me of being cold-hearted. Carol chimed in, claiming I was trying to humiliate them by rejecting their offer. They didn't outright yell, but the passive-aggressive digs were relentless. Meanwhile, my husband just sat there, looking uncomfortable. I turned to him, expecting him to step in, but he hesitated. Finally, he admitted he had known about the vacation home plan. He said he thought it would be a good compromise and hoped I'd agree to avoid more drama. I couldn't believe it. He'd kept this from me, knowing full well how I felt about the trust. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up researching the property, determined to understand why they were so desperate to hand it over. It didn't take long to find the truth. The vacation home was heavily mortgaged, and they were barely keeping up with payments. The house wasn't a gift. It was a liability they were trying to offload. The next morning, I went to breakfast feeling drained and angry. John and Carol acted as if nothing had happened the night before, cheerfully offering me coffee and making small talk. It was infuriating. I waited for the right moment to confront them, but they beat me to it. Out of nowhere, Carol started talking about Lily. She said that Lily deserved better and hinted that I was being a bad mother by refusing to share family resources. She didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. They thought I was selfish and neglecting my daughter by keeping the trust fund locked down. That was the final straw. I stood up, told them we were leaving, and went to pack our things. They followed me to the door, trying to guilt-trip me as I buckled Lily into her car seat. They threw out every manipulative tactic they could think of, but I refused to engage. My husband was quiet the entire ride home, clearly torn between his parents and me. Once we got back, I called my lawyer to fill him in on the situation. He did some digging into the vacation home's financials, and just as I suspected, the house was on the verge of foreclosure. It was practically worthless as an asset, and taking it on would have been a disaster. The whole ordeal left me exhausted but also determined. I realized I couldn't keep reacting to their manipulations. I needed to take control of the situation. I started brainstorming ways to put an end to their schemes once and for all. And as for my husband, let's just say we had a long talk about loyalty and boundaries. I told him this wasn't just about money, it was about protecting Lily's future and standing up to toxic behavior. He didn't have much to say, but I could tell the conversation left an impact. For now, I'm staying one step ahead. John and Carol don't know it yet, but I'm about to make a move they'll never see coming. After leaving the vacation home debacle behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the situation than my in-laws let on. I decided to dig deeper into the property. It didn't take long for my lawyer to uncover something shocking. Years ago, John and Carol had quietly transferred partial ownership of the vacation home to my husband. They hadn't mentioned this to us during their offer, which now seemed like a calculated move to shift their financial mess onto us. When I showed the documents to my husband, he looked genuinely surprised. He swore he had no idea his name was on the property and insisted his parents must have done it without telling him. He apologized for not being upfront about the full extent of their financial problems. Apparently, they'd been struggling for years, borrowing money from family and friends to maintain their lifestyle. At that point, I laid it out for him plainly. He needed to choose between siding with me or continuing to enable his parents. This wasn't just about the vacation home anymore. It was about standing up for our family and setting boundaries. He agreed to stand by me, but I could see the guilt eating at him. Not long after, my in-laws made their next move. They filed a petition, claiming family hardship, and asking the court to force me to amend the trust fund. Their reasoning: they argued that the trust's inflexibility was harming the family by preventing access to much-needed resources. It was absurd, but I wasn't about to let it slide. I immediately countered with my lawyer. We filed a claim to force the sale of the vacation home to pay off the debts tied to it. If John and Carol wanted to play hardball, I was ready to match them move for move. The legal battle quickly became messy. Their financial mismanagement was laid bare, and it wasn't long before word got out. The extended family caught wind of the drama, and opinions were split. Some relatives accused me of being heartless, saying I should have just helped my in-laws out for the sake of family harmony. Others, however, supported me, pointing out the years of reckless behavior that had led to this mess. The family divide was just another layer of chaos, but I stayed focused on the goal: protecting Lily's future. After several tense weeks, the court ruled in my favor. The vacation home was seized and put up for sale. With my lawyer's help, I was able to secure full control of the property, ensuring that the proceeds would go toward paying off the debts rather than lining John and Carol's pockets. Around this time, I was contacted by a distant relative I hadn't spoken to in years. They reached out to offer support and shared stories of their own run-ins with John and Carol's manipulative behavior. It was both validating and sad to realize how many people they'd taken advantage of over the years. Meanwhile, my husband was facing his own internal struggle. Seeing the extent of his parents' toxic behavior was a wake-up call for him, but it wasn't easy to let go of the guilt. He'd spent his whole life trying to please them, and now he was starting to see how one-sided their relationship really was. Once the vacation home sale was finalized, I started thinking about what to do with the proceeds. Keeping the money didn't feel right, considering how it was tied to so much drama and manipulation. That's when the idea came to me. I would donate the proceeds to a cause I cared deeply about. When I shared my plan with my husband, he was hesitant at first. He worried about how his parents would react, but I reminded him that their opinion no longer mattered. This was about doing something positive with a situation that had been nothing but toxic from the start. As expected, John and Carol didn't take the news well. When they found out about the donation, they accused me of trying to ruin them and destroy the family's reputation. Their meltdown was so over the top that I could only shake my head at this point. Then came the icing on the cake. Out of sheer spite, they filed a false police report, claiming I had stolen family property by selling the vacation home. It was a desperate move, and it backfired spectacularly. I provided the police with airtight evidence proving I had full legal ownership of the property. The case was dismissed almost immediately, leaving John and Carol humiliated once again. The fallout from their antics was swift. Relatives who had initially taken their side began distancing themselves, realizing how far they were willing to go to manipulate the situation. My husband, too, seemed to finally reach a breaking point. He told me he felt like a weight had been lifted now that we were no longer entangled in their mess. As for me, I'm just getting started. Setting boundaries with toxic people isn't easy, but this whole ordeal has taught me the importance of standing firm. There's still work to be done, but one thing is clear: I'm not letting John and Carol control our lives any longer. After the court finalized the sale of the vacation home, my lawyer confirmed that all mortgages and debts tied to it were cleared through the proceedings. For the first time, the property was officially in my name, free and clear. It felt like a small victory, but I knew I didn't want to hold on to it. The house was tainted by all the drama and manipulation, and I was determined to turn it into something positive. When I told my husband I planned to donate the vacation home proceeds to a local organization that helps victims of domestic abuse, he hesitated. He worried it would be the final nail in the coffin for his relationship with his parents. I understood where he was coming from, but I reminded him of everything they'd done: the lies, the manipulation, the false police report. At some point, enough is enough. He didn't argue, but I could tell he was conflicted. I didn't waste time. I reached out to the organization and began the process of transferring the funds. Once everything was finalized, I publicly announced the donation on social media. I didn't go into the family drama, just highlighted the importance of the cause and my desire to make a difference. As expected, the announcement sent John and Carol into a frenzy. They called and texted nonstop, demanding an explanation. When I didn't respond, they showed up at our house uninvited. They accused me of destroying a family legacy and claimed the vacation home had sentimental value. I couldn't believe the audacity. This was the same property they'd tried to dump on us when it was drowning in debt. The drama didn't stop there. John and Carol started spreading false rumors to the extended family, claiming I had manipulated the court system to steal the house. They painted me as greedy and selfish, conveniently leaving out the part where they tried to use the trust fund to bail themselves out of debt. But this time, their smear campaign didn't gain much traction. Other family members, aware of their history of financial irresponsibility, started reaching out to me in support. Some even shared their own stories of being pressured or manipulated by John and Carol over the years. It was a bittersweet relief to know I wasn't alone in this. The turning point for my husband came a few weeks later. He overheard a conversation between his parents and another relative during a family gathering. They were mocking me, calling me names, and blaming me for ruining their lives. Something in him snapped. He walked away from the conversation and told me later that night he was done. He didn't want to make excuses for them anymore or let their toxicity affect our family. The donation brought a wave of positive attention. The organization issued a public statement thanking me for my contribution and highlighting how the funds would be used to support victims of abuse. Local news outlets picked up the story, and I made sure to keep the focus on the cause rather than the family drama. John and Carol weren't ready to give up. They threatened to sue the organization, claiming the donation was illegitimate because the house had been a family asset. It was a laughable claim, and their case was dismissed before it even made it to court. This only added to their humiliation, as word of their antics spread throughout their community. The backlash was swift. Neighbors and acquaintances who had once admired their flashy lifestyle began to distance themselves. Their behavior and motives were finally exposed for what they were. In one last-ditch effort, they tried to contest Lily's trust fund, claiming the terms were unfair and restrictive. Their lawyer didn't even make it through the first consultation. The trust was airtight, and there was no legal ground to challenge it. That was the final blow. With the in-laws finally out of moves, my husband reflected on everything that had happened. He admitted that cutting ties with them felt liberating, even though it was painful. He apologized for not supporting me sooner and promised to prioritize our family from now on. We celebrated the end of the drama with a quiet dinner at home, just the three of us. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to focus on our family and leave the toxicity behind. Looking back, I'm proud of how we handled everything. Turning the vacation home into something meaningful was the best decision we could have made. It was a way to reclaim control and make a positive impact out of a messy situation. This chapter of our lives is finally closed. I'm refocusing my energy on Lily, our future, and the things that truly matter. If nothing else, this ordeal has taught me the importance of standing firm and protecting what's most important. And as for John and Carol, I'm done with them. For good. After the dust settled from the donation and the failed legal threats, my husband and I focused on rebuilding our relationship. For the first time in months, we had space to breathe without his parents' drama hanging over us. He took responsibility for how he'd handled things in the past, admitting he'd been too quick to give his parents the benefit of the doubt. He promised to prioritize our family moving forward. Slowly but surely, we started to rebuild the trust that had been strained by everything we'd been through. Meanwhile, John and Carol weren't quite ready to let go. They began reaching out to us through mutual family members, claiming they wanted to make amends. It didn't take long for their true intentions to surface. They were also asking for financial help. They framed it as a desperate plea for forgiveness, but their requests for money made it clear they were still trying to manipulate us. I made it clear through the family members they contacted that we weren't interested in any further communication. I blocked them on all platforms and instructed my husband to do the same. Any messages or calls from them would be ignored. The boundaries were firm: no more manipulation, no more guilt trips, no more excuses. A few weeks later, the organization that received the vacation home proceeds invited us to a special event honoring our donation. It was a heartfelt ceremony where they shared how the funds were already making a difference in the lives of abuse survivors. Being there with my husband and Lily felt like a full circle moment. It reminded us that something good had come out of all the chaos. Around this time, my husband began reconnecting with extended family members who had been alienated by his parents over the years. Without his parents' influence clouding things, these relationships started to heal. Relatives who had been distant were now more open and supportive. Many of them shared their own stories of dealing with John and Carol's manipulations, further solidifying our decision to cut ties. Back on their end, John and Carol's situation took a steep decline. Without our financial support, they were forced to sell off their remaining assets to keep up with their debts. The big house, the flashy cars, it all had to go. From what I heard through the grapevine, they had downsized to a small rental property in a less desirable part of town. One day, we received a letter from them. It was framed as an apology, but it didn't take long to see it for what it really was, a thinly veiled attempt to guilt us into helping them again. They acknowledged their mistakes in vague terms, but still managed to throw in demands and passive-aggressive comments about how families should stick together. We didn't respond. I filed the letter away and moved on. The gossip among the extended family didn't stop there. More relatives started coming forward with stories about how John and Carol had borrowed money from them and never paid it back, or how they'd been manipulated into covering for their financial missteps. Hearing these stories was equal parts frustrating and validating. It confirmed that their behavior wasn't just directed at us, but was part of a long-standing pattern. With the legal battles behind us, I turned my attention back to Lily's trust fund. I worked with my lawyer to review the terms and ensure everything was as secure as possible. I even added a few additional protections, just in case someone ever tried to challenge it again. At the same time, my husband and I began setting up a college fund and exploring other opportunities to secure Lily's future. Not long after, I had a chance encounter with one of John and Carol's former friends. They recognized me at a local event and struck up a conversation. Without much prompting, they began sharing details about how reckless John and Carol had been with money. Lavish parties, risky investments, gambling trips disguised as business deals. It was worse than I had imagined. It was clear they had been living way beyond their means for years, relying on others to bail them out when things went south. That conversation sparked a reflection for my husband. He started opening up about his childhood and the patterns he had noticed but never fully understood. The constant moving, the sudden influxes of money followed by long stretches of tight budgets, it all made sense now. He admitted that his parents' financial abuse and gaslighting had shaped the way he saw money and family dynamics. Recognizing this was painful, but it also gave him the clarity he needed to move forward. Through it all, I found myself growing stronger. Standing up to John and Carol had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it showed me just how much I was capable of. The support from close friends and family only reinforced this. Many of them shared similar stories of dealing with toxic family dynamics, and it felt good to know I wasn't alone. This chapter of our lives is finally closing. The in-laws' influence over us is gone, and I feel more secure in my role as a wife and mother. As I look to the future, I know our family is better off without the toxicity that once overshadowed us. Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. A few weeks after we thought we had closed the chapter on John and Carol's involvement in our lives, they showed up unannounced at our home. It was early on a Saturday morning, and I was in the kitchen making breakfast for Lily. My husband opened the door, and there they were, disheveled and looking far from the polished image they always tried to maintain. They said they needed to talk. At first we listened, unsure of what to expect. They claimed they had lost everything, their house, their savings, and their social circle. They begged for help, saying they had no one else to turn to. They even asked to see Lily, calling her their only source of hope now. I could feel my husband wavering as they piled on the guilt, but I wasn't having it. I calmly but firmly told them that their decisions had led them to this point, and we were not responsible for fixing their mess. I also reminded them that they were not welcome to see Lily, especially after everything they had done. That's when the situation escalated. John and Carol refused to leave, insisting they deserved a second chance. They started raising their voices, accusing us of abandoning family and blaming me for their downfall. At this point, it was clear they weren't going to back down, so I called the police. When the officers arrived, John and Carol tried to spin the situation, saying they were just trying to visit their granddaughter. But I calmly explained the history, the trespassing, and the harassment we had endured. The officers gave them a warning and told them to leave, making it clear they would face consequences if they returned. I hoped that would be the end of it, but a few days later, a mutual family friend reached out. Apparently, John and Carol had asked them to plead their case to us. The friend came over to talk, and after hearing the full story from our side, they were stunned. They had no idea how manipulative John and Carol had been, or how far they had gone to try and control us. By the end of the conversation, the friend apologized for getting involved and promised to steer clear of any future drama. After this incident, my husband and I made a decision. We were going to break the cycle for Lily. We agreed to prioritize teaching her about healthy boundaries, financial independence, and the importance of standing up for herself. We wanted her to grow up knowing she didn't have to tolerate toxic behavior, no matter where it came from. To symbolize this fresh start, we made a small donation to another charity in Lily's name. It wasn't about making a statement to John and Carol. It was about showing ourselves that we could continue to do good in the world without letting toxicity hold us back. Just when we thought John and Carol were finally done, they made one last attempt to reopen the vacation home case. They tried to claim they had been unfairly pressured into transferring ownership years ago. The case was dismissed almost immediately as frivolous, but it only added to their humiliation. Around this time, my husband confessed that he felt like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel trapped by his parents' manipulations. He thanked me for standing strong and for showing him what healthy boundaries looked like. The ripple effect of John and Carol's behavior continued to spread through the extended family. Relatives who had once supported them began cutting ties, realizing how toxic they were. Some even reached out to us to apologize for doubting our side of the story earlier. Amid all this, Lily hit a big milestone. She took her first steps. It was such a joyous moment for us as a family and served as a reminder of what really mattered. Watching her wobble across the room, giggling the whole way, made all the drama seem so small in comparison. Word eventually got around that John and Carol had quietly moved out of state. They left behind a tarnished reputation, burned bridges, and a trail of unpaid debts. It was sad in a way, but also a relief to know they wouldn't be causing any more trouble in our lives. With them gone, my husband and I finally felt free to enjoy our lives. We took our first real vacation in years, a peaceful trip to the mountains, just the three of us. It was exactly what we needed. No drama, no tension, just quality time together as a family. Looking back, I feel nothing but gratitude for how far we've come. This experience taught me the importance of protecting my family and standing up for what's right, no matter how hard it gets. I know Lily's future is secure, not just financially but emotionally too. She'll grow up knowing her parents worked hard to create a safe, loving environment for her. I've learned that family isn't always who you're born into, it's who stands by you. And with my husband and Lily by my side, I know we'll be just fine.